Hello, everyone. This is JT Keating, the Vice President of Product Strategy for Zimperium. I would like to welcome you to our first webinar of the year, and this is one we're very excited about. As you guys know, we really enjoy the role that the market has put upon us, which is kind of being the voice of mobile security from an enterprise perspective. It happens to be what we are very, very good at, and I can say that because I'm not a threat researcher. It's the guys that are much smarter than me. But we do love explaining how the market is shaping up, how it's evolving, how attacks are coming in, talking about the security standpoint, but then also talking about the bad guys, the hacker standpoint. And the simple fact is the hackers have great artifice. They're extremely creative about what they do, and we need to adjust to how we actually respond to them. So standard, format, perfunctory stuff. We will go about 20-25 minutes with Q&A at the end. If there is no Q&A, we don't pose a bunch of fake questions. It's not our style. We just give you time back. But if there is questions, then we will address them either today or by email if we run out of time. This will be, there'll be an archived version of this up on the site. And then also, all of y'all, we will be sending you the report itself, the Frost Radar report that we're going to be covering some highlights of today. We'll actually send you the report itself along with the Zimperium profile that's a part of that report. So I'm sure you all are very familiar with Frost Sullivan. It's important to note that the Frost Radars is a thing that have started doing over the last few years, which is a really, really interesting way of looking at the markets, whatever markets they're focused on. And it is important to note, because obviously Frost & Sullivan has a couple different parts of their business. They have actually produced reports for vendors such as ourselves in the past, but they also have a client business, an advisory business, very similar to a lot of other analyst firms. This report was written for the European market in particular, and we're going to dive into the findings of it by a really, really smart analyst. If you ever get a chance, Jared is the analyst over there. He is really, really good and very humble and very willing to talk to anybody about any parts of this and give a very factual opinion. It's one of the things we love about him. But this is for the advisor services. So there's no part of this that any vendor paid for. We just happen to be included in it, and so we're just going to be hitting some of the highlights. So our agenda for today, as we dive into this whole thing, is I'm going to give you a very quick intro to Zimperium, and the reason I'm doing it is not to hammer you over the head about Zimperium, but when we start talking about some of the findings and the profile that's actually in the radar itself, it helps to kind of know who Zimperium is if you don't have that. Then we are specifically going into the Frost Radar for the European MTD market. That's what the actual report is all about. Jared has indicated that he's planning on doing one on a worldwide perspective, probably sometime in 2020. But this happens to be a snapshot of the players in the market for mobile threat defense, particularly in the European theater. And I think there's some very interesting findings that frankly cross boundaries. And I'll tell you some places where I think that there's some things unique in Europe and then others. So who's Zimperium, for those folks that don't know? We are the enterprise MTD guys. There's other guys that have started in the consumer space, but we are the enterprise MTD guys. And we protect more enterprises and governments against more threats in terms of attack vectors and attack types, which I'll talk about, than anybody else in the world. So we actually have a tremendous amount of experience and tremendous amount of data that comes in with a focus on protecting enterprises. And when you think about the MTD market, whether it's from Frost & Sullivan or Gartner or IDC or Forrester or it's enterprise focused. Yes, there's mobile security needs for consumers, but MTD as a market, MTD in terms of requirements of connections with UEMs and the like, putting information into SIMs or EDR, it's an enterprise play. We have one core detection engine. It's called Z9. I like to talk sometimes about the fact that like BMW is an engine company, not a car company. They produce engines and they put it in a whole bunch of different places. We have one core machine learning based engine. Our core differentiator in the enterprise market, a huge differentiator from the other leading players, is we're the only ones who actually do all of our detection on device, machine learning based detection on device. We train in the lab, but then it detects on device. The other major players do all the detection in the lab or up in the cloud. We fundamentally believe that's flawed. And the reason we do is we have these four major attack vectors. One of the major ways of targeting an enterprise, the most efficient way of targeting an enterprise, is to put up a fake Wi-Fi network or to do a man-in-the-middle attack. If the bad guy owns the network, the bad guy is not going to send you to a cloud-based detection service. He's going to cut that off immediately. So for that and many other reasons, including privacy, cloud independence, all these, we fundamentally, passionately believe you need to do your detection on device. So Z9 does a detection of known and unknown attacks across these four vectors on device. You can roll Z9 out in one of two ways. If you're protecting a device 100% of the time, and this is the primary focus of MTD, basically mobile EDR, if you will, you need a product called ZIPS, and that stands for Z Intrusion Prevention System. That runs 100% of the time on your device. It detects attacks, and quite often in connection with UEMs is what protects the device 100% of the time. If, however, you have a mobile app, you can actually drop Z9 in an SDK directly inside of your mobile app. And in that case, you're not protecting the device, you're protecting the app and the session that app is having. So banking is a real simple example. Financial services is a huge vertical for us, which we'll be talking about. And so using a bank as an example, we have a bunch of banks that are using ZIPS to protect their employees, and they're using ZApp to protect their mobile banking users. Two different use cases, exact same engine. Both of them come into Z Console, which is our cloud-based console. As I mentioned, an advantage of doing on-device detection is we don't care what cloud you want to put the management console in. The guys that are doing cloud-based detection have locked their console into AWS because all of their detection is in AWS. Another huge advantage we have, because we're doing our detection on device, we have on-prem without any problems whatsoever, because all the detection is actually occurring on the device. The management console is really there for policies and reporting and the like. We integrate in with the largest set of UEMs. We're also the only ones who handle multiple UEMs in a single console. So for instance, if you're going from one to another, what's happening right now a lot is we have folks that are on an MDM or a UEM, and they're all kind of related. And I'm going to come back to that in a second here from the evolution of management, the evolution of security. It's part of the Frost report. A lot of folks are saying, I'm going to leave my UEM alone for managed devices, but I'm going to go to something like Intune MAM for BYOD. We can handle both. It doesn't matter. We put all information into the greatest number of SIMs. We're the only ones with, for instance, a Splunk app that's a part of this whole thing. We also integrate in with EDRs like Microsoft Defender ATP or McAfee EPO. We integrate both with those. And then behind both of these is a capability called Z3A. That stands for Advanced App Analysis. What that basically talks about is you can have perfectly legitimate apps in your environment. The malicious apps are detected by Z9, but you can have perfectly legitimate apps on your employees' devices, for instance, that have huge security and privacy risks in them. And so you want to identify what those are and then create policies against it. So commercial over, that's the end of the Zimperium stuff. Now with that as a frame, as we start diving in, we're going to go into the Frost radar for the European MTD market. And again, the Frost radar, you will be getting the report with the full market analysis and the Zimperium profile, which I'm just touching on as we roll through here. So first, and this is a little bit of an eye chart. I tried to take it apart, but then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep it structured the same way that they structured it, and we'll just go through each one. Here are some of the key findings that Jared and team articulate in the report itself. So the first one is he's talking about the market size itself, and he believes that it's going to be over 750 million by end of 2023 just in the European theater. And he goes on to talk about, well, kind of why is that? Well, there is a lot more attention being put on it from the security news standpoint. it's kind of like the FedEx logo. Once somebody points the arrow out, you can never unsee it. Now that we're talking about mobile security, you'll see it in the press all the time. Last year, it was Jeff Bezos, it was the WhatsApp, it was the website that was delivering exploits to take over iOS devices. It was 1,000 security vulnerabilities that were patched by Apple and Google. The list goes on and on and on. BYOD, I mentioned it a minute ago. BYOD is a huge initiative, both in Europe as well as the rest of the world. We're seeing a huge sea change towards BYOD. But when it comes from a security standpoint, if the end user owns that device, how do you approach security differently? What we're starting to see time after time after time again is they're saying, look, I'm going to do BYOD. I'm going to enable you to access your email and everything else, but only if you have an MTD solution in place. And I think a huge point behind all of this is, philosophically, everybody is finally starting to catch up to this fact. An endpoint is an endpoint is an endpoint. 60% of the endpoints and growing today that access corporate enterprises or enterprise assets and networks and everything are mobile and growing. So nobody would even think twice. They would think you were crazy if you had a laptop that didn't have some sort of EPP or EDR solution on them, endpoint protection platform, endpoint detection and response. Why is it any different from mobile? Especially as the guys are going to BYOD, they're saying, look, we put antivirus in quotes on laptops. We're going to put antivirus in quotes, because it's much more than that, on mobile devices. GDPR is a really interesting thing from the European standpoint. It happens to be a huge advantage of ours, again, because since we are doing all of our detection on device, we don't have to take any data off the device if we don't want to. So you can balance the forensics with the privacy issues as much as you want. So we actually even have a straight GDPR setting where you're like, hey, this group is GDPR, boom, push the button, no PII, complete protection, you know about the threats, but there's no PIIs. But these are things that are driving the growth in the European market. Obviously GDPR and PSD2 being unique to the European theater. Getting into this, there is definitely some vertical differences, and there's also different countries. Now here you see, Germany, France, UK are adopting mobile security at a higher rate. Those happen to be our biggest markets as well in Europe, but they're not the only ones. We've got customers in Italy, we've got customers in Spain, we've got customers up in Finland, Sweden. We've got them all over the place. But it is growing, and it does depend on the thought process. What's been really interesting for us is some of the verticals. Some of the verticals are highly regulated, and you'd expect that they'd be putting security out there, because we all know that the only hacker you ever face is an auditor. So if you're in PCI or you expect it, right? But we've been amazed at how many unregulated, from the security compliance standpoint, markets are in Europe in particular are really buying in. For instance, manufacturing has been hugely impressive for us. And then there's some that are common across the world: financial services, public sector, et cetera. Jared talks about the integration of MTD with UEM products. I would say from an enterprise standpoint, now we have thousands of customers around the world, business customers around the world, so they're all sorts of different sizes. When it comes to what I would consider enterprise, or what I would consider, the government agencies, public sector, that size, I would say 100% of our customers have a UEM solution of some sort. I mentioned the fact that we're integrated in with the largest set of UEMs, and we're the only ones that can handle multiple UEMs in a single tenant. That's because of this reality. And there are huge partnerships between guys like us and leading UEMs. For instance, MobileIron actually integrates our Z9 engine directly into the MobileIron threat defense solution. So if you get MITD, you have Z9 inside of it. For instance, we're part of VMware's Workspace ONE intelligence initiative. For instance, we're highly linked in with the Microsoft guys, whether it's for the MDM, MAM, or stepping outside of this into Defender ATP and some of the EDR stuff. So there's a lot of these things where all these things are blending together. And if your provider doesn't have a tight integration with these guys, can't take groups from the UEMs and build group-based policies, you're kind of setting yourself up for a lot more work than you really want to have. When I think about enterprise means we fit into your way of doing things, not forcing you into our way of doing things. What cloud do you want to be on? What UEMs are you using? What SIMs are you using? That's all directly connected. And as Jared's talked about, those integrations just continue to get tighter. So I mentioned the security side of things. Integrating our data into EDR solutions is huge. We have a growing list of EDR companies that we are working with. What's the value proposition there? Well, the value proposition is 60% of your endpoints have no visibility before an MTD solution like ours. So let's say that JT's smartphone got attacked. And then also at the same time, his laptop got attacked. Well, having an integrated view of JT, as one example, can really help with threat hunting, can really help with the full analysis to know what is my risk exposure and how do I respond to it. I mentioned, we publicly went out and talked about Defender ATP. We've talked about EPO from McAfee. These are some of the ones we're tied into, and we've got some others coming up down the pipe. But the endpoint, since an endpoint is an endpoint is an endpoint, EDR is incomplete without mobile. And people are starting to recognize that. Now, I mentioned the UEM piece. This, to me, is one of the things I think is really cool. And we're going to play with terms here differently. Jared has a different set of terms than I'm using right now. And Jared gets paid the big bucks, so he's probably right. But I'll give you my perspective on it. There's now unified endpoint management, and that has been a major sea change, right? Don't just manage, like all the Windows guys are in one, and then all the mobile guys are in another. Let's unify the management piece, which is why BlackBerry, Microsoft, go through the list, Mobile Iron, VMware, all these guys are doing UEM, Unified Endpoint Management. I personally believe, since mobile threat defense is the equivalent of EPP and EDR for mobile, you're seeing a sea change where there's going to be unified endpoint security. So my kind of term is unified endpoint security. Jared's got a different term here, endpoint security monitoring and management, but it's the same basic idea of all of these things converging together as a mega trend, as he puts it. If you want some additional points, this is not just a Zimperium thing. Yes, we are powering mobile threat defense solutions of major EPP players. Yes, we're integrated in with the EDR players. We'll talk even more about that. So yeah, but if you look at just the market, VMware acquires Carbon Black. BlackBerry acquires Cylance. You just start going down through the list and you're like, okay, these worlds are converging. And that's what Jared is seeing there as well. And then this is an absolutely factual point. When you look at the four major attack vectors, device attacks, network attacks, phishing, mobile phishing, and malware, from an enterprise standpoint, malware is the least important in the grand scheme of things. Why do I say that? Because it's the least effective way of targeting an enterprise. If I'm going to target XYZ company, I'm not going to drop an app in the App Store and pray somebody from XYZ company downloads it. It's a horrible business model. What I'm going to do is, I know the end goal is to compromise the device. Why do I say that? Because the end goal is always to be persistent. That's what the bad guys want to do. They want to own that device as long as possible. The only way, with all apps being in containers and with the operating system being locked down, the only way to be persistent on mobile is to actually compromise it, elevate privileges. It could be root access, or it could be getting a malicious profile on from an iOS standpoint. Network attack, as I mentioned, is very efficient. I set up a fake Wi-Fi network directly across from XYZ, wait till somebody from XYZ connects, bang, I've now gone after XYZ. Mobile phishing is the other one. And mobile phishing, 90% of breaches start with phishing, and 2/3 of emails are read on mobile. And by the way, that's just the corporate email. On mobile, there's brand new attack vectors. We have a whole white paper on machine learning detection of phishing on our website. You can go download it. corporate email is only one vector of mobile phishing. You also have personal email. You have messenger apps. You have texting. These are things totally outside of any traditional corporate anti-phishing solutions, which are predominantly email-based. So the bad guys know I'm going after the weakest link, and we are so used to just clicking things on our phone, and it's smaller, much more difficult to compare, much easier to trick people. Mobile phishing is a huge problem, way more so than malware. So those are some of the key points of what Jared is seeing driving this. I mentioned the radar. The radar is actually a visual that they have. And a lot of people are like, well, why are you showing people your competitors? Well, multiple reasons. I mean, first of all, because we're at the top of the list. But second of all, everybody should know these guys anyway. And I mentioned the fact that one of the things that we really enjoy in our market is the fact that we are the guys that people come to for, like, no BS, tell me what the scoop is. What attacks do I need to deal with? What are the pros and cons? We actually have major corporations around the world that ask us to run their POCs for them. We've actually done demonstrations for major analyst firms at their annual events. So we're fine saying, look, here are the players, pros, cons, everything on those lines. But specifically for the European MTD market, we're going to go into the Zimperium profile right here. You see that they've got a growth index, you've got an innovation index, and you can see the folks that are near the top of the combination of growth and innovation. So they have this thing, which for each one, they have a profile. And you got company diagnostic, you've got the strengths of the company, radar positioning, commentary, and then opportunities. And again, I'm just going to hit on a couple highlights. This is all in the report that you guys are going to be seeing, but this is the way that they break companies down. In particular, this is what they say for Zimperium. So first, the diagnostics talks about when we were, founded. We do focus exclusively on the enterprise, which does put us in a very unique spot. We have better integrations. We have more seamless integrations. We have more experience. It's just where we've focused. Other folks focused elsewhere to start off with, right? And our Z9 engine is the one that actually is at the core of all of this. When you think about our strengths over here, on device, he's specifically, Jared's nailing the on device protection is a key critical component. You can see that, when he goes in, he basically says, again, that it's enterprise focused. It's very focused on the privacy side of things. And it can survive from a detection standpoint, even when the bad guy owns the network. So our positioning, as it says, we're in the upper right-hand corner, but this is the key part. We're the absolute leader in both growth and innovation in the European security market. I don't think you could get any stronger of a statement there. So, for us, we are big believers in competition. We are big believers in the fact that you should try a few different companies in anything you're looking at. Don't just take the word of anybody. So one of our primary missions is always we should just be on the short list. And as the absolute leader in the European market, we should be on the short list. And we are more than welcome to compete, and we love competing against everybody else that's out there. Partially because we're all reinforcing the fact that you need to do the protection, but then we also like to win. So a groundbreaking approach to securing mobile devices with respecting end user privacies. When you're dealing with GDPR, we're the guys, right? And it's very nice that he said we're the genuine thought leader and a trendsetter. And then when it comes to the opportunities, you can see he's like, we've got all sorts of opportunities. He's been through our pipeline. We've gone through this just like he has with everybody else. He likes the fact that we're already connected with the EPP and EDR guys. So he wants us to continue to do that, which we know, in fact, we are. And then there's some additional cool network security, network level solutions that we're looking to partner with as well. He just happened to be calling it out, which just reinforces our product strategy. So here is his last words and the key takeaways on the market itself. That was end of the Zimperium part in terms of details. He thinks, we need to continue to innovate. We completely agree. We think that is an absolute, critical component, right? And so obviously anybody that's innovating, anybody that's far to the right of the radar are the guys that are challenging the guys that are not, clearly. That whole thing of moving towards what I call unified endpoint security, he's talking about ESMM, that convergence of how do we put all of our endpoints in one view to make it as simple and straightforward for our stock guys as humanly possible, is a key critical component, not only in Europe, but obviously worldwide. And then again, the same fundamental push the envelope that we've been seeing in the EPP EDR side of the world on machine learning, AI. How do you just continue to evolve your engines as the new threats come out to make sure that you're able to catch up and stay way ahead? So the last thing I will leave you with is, in addition to all the stuff that just happened, talking about the report, all of, the European market, et cetera, Frost & Sullivan basically gave us a best practice award. Our team gets to pick this up at a black tie event, apparently in London, that I will not be going to, unfortunately. But it is actually the Growth, Innovation, and Leadership Award. It is the ultimate award each time they do a radar. There's other awards for people that have shown great growth. There's other people who have shown great innovation. This is the award for both. Your growth, your innovation, overall leadership. They gave us that award, and obviously we're very proud to have that. So with that, I'm going to stop and see. Let's see how I do. Hey, 26, 27, not too bad. I'm going to stop and see if we have any questions. And then if we don't, like I said, I'll give you time back. While I'm doing this, though, please do follow us on social media. Follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever happens to be your favorite, because that's a great place to continue to get mobile security information and data. So I do not see any questions. Again, look for the report to be sent your direction here before too long, and hope everybody has a fantastic 2020. And thank you for spending a little bit of time with me. Have a great day.